is up, Generals? We are back with Ultimate General Civil War. This is the J&P Rebalance mod, Confederate Major General Let's Play. We are looking at the camp screen before the Battle of Malvern Hill, which happens a couple of days after Gaines Mill. So because we were successful at Gaines Mill, the enemy is going to be suffering from a pretty healthy weapons debuff in terms of the quality thereof. And they're also going to be experiencing a bit of a size debuff in terms of the quality or the numeric amount of soldiers they've got access to. Let's take a look at the report. Elite brigades, 8,300 in total strength, and 14,000 recruits coming from Ohio. OH, represent. So the army has grown in size, and we're going to do a little bit of work on the camp screen before we jump ourselves out there. But in terms of my numbers, we're looking at a Confederate army of, give or take, 36,000 and 84 guns against a Union army of just over 40,000 and 140 some odd guns. They have fewer brigades than we do as well, so their brigades are likely to be quite a bit larger than ours, which is particularly concerning for me because we're going to be on the attack in this battle. As we were at Gaines Mill, in fairness. So this is going to be a quick camp video. I don't have time to record a full battle tonight, but I wanted to take the time to answer some questions from. Let me pull it up here. Answer some great questions I thought from Mike Sullivan, one of the viewers, and. Sullivan asks, what is the, where was it? The question was, what is the difference between, I've lost track of your terminology. What is the difference between numbered infantry and rifle brigades in terms of rifles and perks? So, and then the other question we're going to get to is, what type of guns are you arming your Rangers with? I'm going to actually expand that question out to a larger question about how I'm equipping the army generally. So as you can see at current strength or current organization, the stereotypical Confederate infantry brigade stands at about 1,250 soldiers, and they are universally equipped with the musketry drill perk at 1 star. I have no 2-star infantry units to my knowledge. I have several unperked units as well. So let's first get to the nameology of my brigades. I have for a long time struggled with how to name units that is interesting, vaguely historical, and the goals are interesting, vaguely historical, and allows me to propagate the role play aspect of commanding an army in this game. So a lot of the game for me is the story or narrative of developing a division out to several corps and then fighting the war. And so it's important to me to know the history of First Rifles, who have only existed since First Bull Run because I deleted. Well, that's cool. They tell you the guns they had and who was running. I didn't know that they did that. I don't know if they've always done that and I've just never noticed until now or what. But yeah. That's really cool. They tell you who the unit commanders were and what guns they had. Anyway, sorry. So I had other units, and they had the other perk, the one that's speed and charge damage, and it's just not good. So unfortunately, I've had to delete several units that existed at the beginning of the game because they had what I consider to be the incorrect perk. So generally speaking, the intention initially had been the militia, infantry, and rifles namography or namology to have different meanings to tell me how I use the unit. And that was part of all three goals, the interesting, the role play, and then the useful. You'll if you've watched my Union Let's Play, you'll remember that I had the in parentheses I had the unit weapon in the name, and I had discovered in the course of the playthrough that really that didn't meaningfully change how I played the unit on the field. I just need to know if it's got rifles, and then if it doesn't. And as we go later and later and later into the campaign, that increasingly is not an issue, obviously. You get more and more access to rifles, and it becomes less and less of a problem. So in the time here, I was using militia to indicate units that had no experience and smoothbore, or it just had smoothbore weapons, really. The experience actually wasn't really a problem. As you can see, though, as the army has continued to gain experience, that's less and less of a realistic moniker, and it's hard for me to keep up because I'm just, I'm not really covering that too much. You also noticed, or should have noticed, in the Union campaign, I had several different naming conventions for artillery. That was because I wanted to know, it's an ordnance unit, I'm using this for counter battery or long-term work. It's a howitzer unit, I'm using this for close-in support, that kind of thing. So what I've done to kind of accomplish that same goal here is that they're all called artillery because they're part of the artillery branch, but I've kept the gun in the name of the unit. So James units, this is a 6-pounder unit. This is a 3-inch unit, the 10-pound ordnance, what the game calls it here. This is another 10-pound ordnance unit. I'm not a giant fan of this gun, but it's got decent range, and it fires at a decent rate. It does solid damage, and it's something I've got a lot of. The 12-pound howitzer is just atrocious. So I need something with a little bit of reach out and touch somebody potential. So I'm using what I've got. Even if I don't like it, I've got to use what I have access to. So infantry are armed with whatever gun I can get my hands on. The best units in my army get access to the Enfield, and then we trickle it down from there. As I fill the army out for Malvern Hill, I will likely create units with the precision musket or the Rebal musket, as the case might be. I am hesitant to buy a lot of rifles, so the Enfield, for example, at $51 is to me not practicable to purchase in large number. Similarly, I have been purchasing to some degree the Whitworth with scope because I've been seeing that unit really continue to perform at exceptional levels. So 20th Sniper here, led by Colonel John Imbledon. That's still too low for 300 snipers, but whatever. They have the scope Whitworth. I bought them with rep, and we've got 28th Sniper also armed with Whitworths. I'll get to the Rangers in a second here. So generally speaking, in terms of numerology of unit, you're going to see cavalry, infantry, and artillery are going to be numbered independently of each other. So it is possible within one division to have 1st Infantry, 1st Artillery, and 1st Cavalry. Early on in the game, that's quite likely, in fact. As you can see now, things have gotten quite a bit more jumbled. I kind of go out of my way to jumble things because historically you very rarely saw 1st, 2nd, and 3rd infantry regiments fighting next to each other. It was very rare. It did happen where you'd see, especially if an entire brigade was assembled at the state level, they would typically have sequential regiments formed together within that brigade. So that's possible. I am transitioning from the full militia, infantry, rifles namology for my brigades to this rather boring German army-inspired system of number dot unit type. I am debating what I want to add in this section here. So one thought process is to have the units efficiency, because that's a stat that kind of governs a lot of things about the unit: how quickly it moves, how quickly it responds to orders, how fast it reforms, how quickly it reloads its rifle, all that kind of stuff. The other thought process would be its weapon. But the thing is, again, I don't really care. I know I'm supposed to. I know they're different. I know they do different things. and they have different performance characteristics that I've talked about ad nauseum, the characteristics of these rifles against each other. And I do care at the camp screen, but on the battlefield, I genuinely could not care less. A rifle is a rifle is a rifle in terms of how I use the unit. So I need to figure out what I put in that name. Because when you go to the battle screen here, so let's go ahead and save this really. Well, when you go to the battle screen, on the unit card, you see the unit name and their stats and how many men they've killed and how many losses they've sustained or taken. In terms of performance characteristics, I don't need that data. I need morale, condition, cover. I need that. I also need to know what kind of gun they've got, and I need to know their stats. I can't get that in one screen. I'm constantly clicking back and forth on that little eye icon on the unit card to see their stats. So the thought process had been stick the weapon in the name so that at least I have an idea of what kind of weapon it is. So you'd see 5.inf, and I would know, oh, they've got the 61, the Springfield Arms, 1861 model rifled musket, or percussion cap rifled musket, or whatever the official, historical name was. You would see this in my Union campaign. I did this all the time. I had, unit number, unit type, and then weapon. And because I had the same perk selection for infantry pretty much across the board, it didn't really matter. As long as I could see the number of stars they had, I knew what perks they had because I just never deviated. I really, really wanted to try the other perk, and I just never saw the point. I never saw the units that had that perk perform well. I saw in play that the plus 100% accuracy here was so vital in terms of units being functional that I just could never justify dedicated melee units in that first perk. And I haven't gotten to the point yet where I've thought about what I want the middle perk to be, so we'll get to that in a second. So infantry is going to be universally number of unit type, INF, infantry, and then I've got to figure out what I want to do in the remainder of the unit card, because I don't care on the battlefield what kind of gun they have. If they've got a rifle, that's really all I care about. So I'm still probably going to keep, let's just pretend that ninth still had a musket of some kind or another. So they have the 1855, so they would normally be keyed as infantry. But if they had a musket, I would key them as militia, so I knew, oh, they have militias or they have muskets. If I want them to be useful, I have to get right up in their grill, or they're going to be useless. So you'll see the same thing. I do that with the cavalry. I don't really give a shit what kind of gun they have. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Whatever gun they have is whatever. It's immaterial. But how I use the unit matters significantly. Now, in fairness, I can tell that from the unit card. Notice there's the carbine that crosses the cavalry here, and then there's no carbine there. This is actually a better logo. So there, and then there. Notice the carbine. That tells me really everything I need to know about the unit, how I'm going to use it, what its intended purpose is on the battlefield, and so forth and so on. In the past, I had called my melee units hussars or lancers or shock cavalry or whatever. So if you can't tell, I'm clearly a fan of the Napoleonic Wars and how they organize their armies and everything else. And then in the Napoleonic period, the dragoon had become more just a regular heavy cavalryman. They had a carbine, for historical sake, but very rarely would you see dragoons fighting in their intended manner. So historically, the dragoon was intended to be a mounted infantryman. They would ride to battle, dismount, and fight on foot. So this title is very accurate for how the units were actually utilized in the course of the war. In the course of the war, most cavalry rode to wherever they were going to fight or conducted reconnaissance, dismounted, and fought on foot. There are isolated incidences of traditional cavalry charges occurring. They're very rare. Sabers were very rarely utilized in the traditional cavalry charge kind of manner. So I feel like calling these units Dragoon is incredibly accurate, and it's very historically kind of appropriate to the way they were utilized in the conflict, in the actual conflict, and then it's also appropriate to call out like the methodology of warfare. The problem is that if I'm basing this on historical, the Napoleonic military, the way that I use my shock cavalry would probably be how that era would have called dragoons, because the dragoon lost really its dismounted infantry function in the course of the Napoleonic Wars, and dragoon units became just medium cavalry units. So I could call the Hussars the cuirassiers, but first of all, it's a bitch and a half to type. It's also hard to say, and body armor of any kind was not worn, but in any statistically significant amount in the course of this war, which basically leaves Hussars. And Hussars is actually pretty accurate. Hussars were not traditionally used in frontal line charges. They were light cavalry, tended to run down routing troops or cause disruption in the rear of the line. And so I feel as if Hussars might be accurate, but I'm using them very aggressively as a shock cav unit. So we'll see. But regardless, the second I see that name and that icon, I know exactly what that unit is intended to be using. So second and third dragoon will ride around and either shoot things from horseback or dismount and fight on foot. Whereas first Hussars, notice they're twice the size of the dragoon units because I'm expecting them to take losses, and I don't care about the efficiency penalties. I don't care, and we'll get into why I don't care in a minute, but I don't care. That leaves the artillery. It really is just dependent upon what kind of gun they have as far as what I use them for. Any unit with the horse artillery perk, which is rapidly becoming my favorite for close units, is always going to be a dedicated infantry support unit, always. So they're going to get the 6-pounders, they're going to get Napoleons, they're going to get howitzers, that kind of thing. And even some of the 10-inch ordnance units are going to get that, because as much as I generally shit on this cannon for what I think is a good reason, it's got a great fire rate 70, versus some of the other guns that fire quite a bit slower. And it's really quite good in the medium ranges. It's got decent damage curves in the medium range compared to its competitors. But the truth of the matter is I really just want more 6-pounders. So, yeah, but I can't afford to buy them. So there's that too, it's a money thing. I'm using the guns I've got, not the guns I want. So paradoxically, I eventually want to replace these 3-inch guns with obsolete 1841 smoothbore field guns because of the way the damage curves work in this particular iteration of the mod. So I do want to make a note. If you're not playing version 1.24, let's say you're watching this video sometime in the future, I'm recording this in April of 2019. So if you're watching this video sometime in the future, there's a really good, March of 2019. There's a really good chance these numbers will look different. So for me, it's 92, 50, 18, 6, 2 is the damage degradation curve. That will likely change in the future. The devs have said to me they will change. So yeah, that's the Army in terms of the methodology for infantry, cavalry, and artillery. So this leaves exactly one unit left, and that's light infantry. And I'm keeping them in the same number column as infantry because they're still, as far as I'm concerned, part of the infantry branch. Their utilization is, of course, different, but they're part of the infantry branch. They would have, the light blue braid if they were in the modern army. They would have, I believe, yellow piping on their pants historically in this era. So I believe. So you get what I'm getting at, right? Like they're just different infantry. So Mr. Sullivan asks me, how are you arming your rangers and everything else? So snipers are going to be utilizing the scoped Whitworth, and theoretically, if money is less of a concern later on in the campaign, they may also be utilizing the unscoped Whitworth. And the reason for that is the accuracy of this weapon and the extreme range. Extreme range, 600. It's incredible damage curve. 7.2 to 9.6 is a very narrow range and quite a bit higher than anything else in the small arms category. And they're very accurate all the way out to max range. So this is a wonderful sniper weapon, and that's why I utilize it. The Rangers, however, are armed with infantry weapons. In the modern military, at least the U.S. Army, I envision Rangers as being just barely one step below Special Forces. So they're not Delta, they're not SEAL Team 6, they're not, a soft brigade or whatever, but they're still really good infantry. They're still, some of the best, elite infantry, given some dangerous tasks and operating ahead of or outside of the normal chain of logistics and command and all that kind of stuff. They're a regular unit, 75th Ranger Battalion. They're a regular Ranger Regiment. I don't know. They're a regular unit. They're just really good. So what that means practically here is that you will see a lot of Ranger units forming in this army. Light infantry will be a common thing. I just call them Rangers because if I'm using 3.inf and then I have 6.linf, first of all, it looks weird. Secondly, it's possible I'll get those confused in the heat of a battle. I'll see linf or linf and I might miss the L and think, oh, it's an infantry unit, and put it in the line. Ranger is visually distinct to me. When I'm playing a battle and I see Ranger, I'm like, oh, got it. It's a light infantry unit. So I'm treating these guys as elite infantry. These are snipers. These are sharpshooters. These are whatever. These are elite infantry. They are intended to shoot for the flanks. They are intended to scout. They are intended to hunt cannons or hunt supply wagons. They are intended to find the enemy flank. And so I'm giving them just generic infantry muskets. What I will never do, I will never give them a carbine, because range 300 is crippling. You need, in my opinion, to have range 400 on your Ranger weapons, because that is the range at which other infantry will engage you. And if you have to spend time running into the range of infantry to engage them, you will die. You will take losses that you don't need to take. Consequently, my Rangers are armed with infantry weapons, and they are armed with some of the better infantry weapons I can buy. And I've debated, and once I get this number down, if I ever get it down, I've debated buying Whitworths for my Rangers because, look, effective range 400. So scope Whitworths, go for my snipers. Regular Whitworths, go for my Rangers eventually. And in the time being, they get the best rifles I can buy that won't break the bank. There's a cutoff right there, right? There's a cost benefit I've got to make analysis. So with the money and manpower I've got left, we take a look at what I have access to. I am interested in the 10-pound Parrot. It's a great weapon. It's got a wonderful damage curve. It is as damaging as the 3-inch ordnance, and it cost me a minimal amount of rep to get it. So I'm debating that. I have more army to fill out. As you've seen, I've got plenty of unit space to fill, and I could theoretically bring 2 more corps. I just can't afford it. And this is the thing that's holding the Confederate Army back. And I'm going to lead the attack with the 2nd Corps because this one has a speed perk. So when they come in later, they'll be faster, and they'll be able to get into position quicker. As you can see, we've got a lot of unit slots we could fill left. So I've got 3 over here, and I've got 5 over here. And I'm going to fill them with light infantry, with artillery, with I don't know what. But this is the state of the Army. This is my thoughts in terms of the camp screen for the Confederate Army at the Major General difficulty level in the JMP Rebalance mod of version 1.24. One topic I haven't discussed yet is officers. So I have belly ached this entire time about what a pain in the butt it is to find good officers. And developing your bench is a real problem. So you've got to think about how you're going to grow that. What of these can you afford to buy? What of these can you use, to level your units up and whatnot? Again, Mr. Sullivan says he's having a hard time filling out his units, finding officers to lead them. Completely agree. Same problem I'm having, same experience I'm running into. Developing your bench of officer corps, your officers, and protecting them as they level up is, I think, in the vanilla game, it's a complete non-issue. I don't care about it. I don't think about it. It's not a thing I worry about. It just is what it is. In this game, I really have to concern myself with losing officers. It hurts to lose a colonel. It hurts. Whenever I get generals, if I ever lose them, it is going to be crushing when that happens, because of the investment in time and energy to get those officers developed. It's going to hurt real bad. So when you're playing, as much as I'm over here like, oh, cannons are good, there's a thought. Maybe I pick up these colonels. I don't know. So you've seen a number of these units. Where are they? Like, they have bad efficiency. Somewhere else I've got bad efficiency. In the vanilla game, I find myself with a dearth of good officers saying, oh, I never want to go into battle with that self-inflicted debuff or punishment of having an insufficient officer for the size of the unit I'm leading. I paradoxically find myself saying in the rebalance mod, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. I find myself frequently sticking captains and brigades and saying, fuck it. Like they're going to suffer this huge efficiency penalty, but I don't care. I'll just make sure that I put those units, I'll flag them, I'll flag them like that or something, where I'll have to create some kind of flag so I know that I can't rely on those units to fight in the center of the battle, in the main part, the crux, the Schwerpunkt, the point of decision. I can't rely on those units to fight at that point. They have to be guarding a rear echelon. They have to be defending your cannons or defending your supply wagons, or alternatively just scouting, holding a point. They have to be doing something where the officer's going to level up, the officer's going to get some experience, the troops are going to get the opportunity to shoot at some things, but that's really pretty much it. You've got to baby those units until the officer levels up to grow into the experience, and you get to the point where you're not experiencing so much of this unit debuff penalty for having too small a unit. Let's take 6th Ranger, for example, and, stick a captain in there, see what happens. You take that penalty, it's not so bad. I bet you I could probably get away with a major in here. So I'm going to do that. Oh, that's a light colonel. Sorry. Can I do a major? Yeah, boom. Great. I'm going to do that, because then maybe I can level up Randy Martin here. And then that frees me up, another colonel to go stick somewhere else. You get what I'm getting at, right? You've got to grow that officer corps. And in the vanilla game, growing your officer corps like this is a fun side game. It's a fun distraction. You could just buy generals to your heart's content and move on with your life. I did it in the Union game. It's not a problem. In this version of the game, I think you have to do it that way. You have to take officers that sometimes aren't up to the task, and they get to suck. They get to suck through one round, and then maybe they're okay in the next round, and you keep on going. I think you have to develop your officer corps internally, or you're never going to have enough units to keep up, and you're going to get overwhelmed pretty quickly, and you're going to start losing battles, because this army has to keep growing to the point where I can fight Antietam. So I'm thinking 2-3 corps of combat units, and maybe a 4th of shit chaff that just exists to fill out rosters and that kind of thing. So I need double the officers I currently have, if that gives you any indication of how big I want to scale this army, or how big I feel like you need to scale this army. And I'm not super sure about those numbers just yet, but that's a ballpark of how I'm feeling. And that's where we're at. That's the state of the union, so to speak. So you've got Ranger units. They've got, good muskets, good high-end muskets, Harper's Ferries, and medium high end for now, but medium tier muskets, Harper's Ferries and Austrian imports and that kind of deal. I've got Rangers, I've got snipers, I've got howitzers, and I've got, that's right, because I want you to be able to shoot a little better at longer ranges. Okay. Because this is also a heavy unit anyway, so even with the horse artillery perk, it's still going to go slow. 1250, the best gun I can get my hands on. The newer the unit, the less experience it has, the more likely it is to be using an 1841, which I think is generally a pretty decent musket, but you can do better as you go up. And that's where we're at. I've got a bunch of units to add. I've got a bunch of armies to grow. You shouldn't expect a video for the remainder of this week. I do apologize for that. I have a final project and a midterm due in the next little while here. So just a quick camp video to take a look at this stuff. I really want to send a thank you to Mike Sullivan and Mike Sullivan, Evan Fortune, Panikraut. You guys have been wonderful with your commentary. It really is just great to have people so actively participating in things. It means a lot to me. It means a lot that there's that community, and I can't wait to give you guys feedback and keep talking about some of this stuff. I can't wait to see where this campaign goes, how the army develops, because I've got to say, I'm really having a blast with how hard this is. I bitch about it all the time. I'm like, oh God, I lost a major. It sucks. And I talk about how difficult it is to grow the army, but I really love how much work it takes to develop your army in this game. And the camp screen has gone from being, I've always thought the camp screen was one of the best parts of this series, and it's just continuing to get even better with the way that the rebalance mod tweaks the availability of certain things, the way that your career points work in terms of making things cheaper, or opening different strategies. Like max ranks and training makes building an army of recruits a lot more practical than relying on vets and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of cool shit going on in the background here, and I'm very excited to see how this all goes out. So thanks again for your great commentary, everybody. Something Compass, Panikraut, Johnny, and Evan and Mike. Guys, keep it up, and I'll see you a little bit towards the middle of next week. Everything that I have to do will have been done and turned in by Tuesday of next week. So lots of coffee, not a lot of sleep. Between now and then, I'll get all these things done, and then I'm going to sleep it off. And then Wednesday, you better believe Wednesday night I'm going to be playing out Malvern Hill. So until then, though, you guys have a great rest of your week. Have a wonderful weekend. The weather, at least in the Midwest of the U.S., is starting to turn really gorgeous, which is going to make being inside all weekend working on homework a real bear. But it's going to be great having the windows open. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks so much for the active commentary. Thanks so much for the interest. This is Fiasco, signing out.